Today we have our own esteemed USU faculty member that has been so kind to come up from the Uinta Basin, and that's Dr. Leona Etchberger. And she's a biologist, and what I know her for more than just biology is all of the faculty development that she has done over the years for her colleagues and mentors, and really, and even us. I've learned every time I spend any time doing anything with Leona, it's always been very educational for me to learn about teaching and improve how I can then teach about teaching. So we're really looking forward to this presentation, and I'd like to turn the time over to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Am I good? Yeah, okay. Thanks, John. I just wanted to say first, when I usually watch these from afar, and the video is like right here, and it looks like nobody's here. So next time you come, you can be nice to the person and sit in the front, because it looks like nobody came to my talk. But it's really full back there, believe me, you guys. All right. So I'm Leona Etchberger, and I teach down at the Uinta Basin. And I wanted to talk to you today about being inclusive. And it dawned on me after watching some of the other inclusive things, just like this word diversity has different meanings to different people. Diversity is really our goal and I'll talk about that in a second. We want to have a more diverse society that can solve and be innovative and solve problems in the future. And so it's really up to us at the universities and colleges to do a good job of educating people to be innovative and thinking. And to do that, if we have lots of people with lots of different ideas coming to the table in a very structured way and organized way, then we can achieve that. And so my hope is that I'm going to be able to start you thinking about this framework of using inclusive teaching as an idea of bringing everybody in and being aware of who's in your classroom and making sure everybody is having the same opportunities to learn. But I also wanted to give a little background about this presentation. It's from some work that I did with a group called the National Academies Scientific Teaching Alliance and the Summer Institutes. And we do something called scientific teaching, which is using evidence-based teaching methods to use active learning and things like that. Greg and I were partners when we went to the Summer Institute a long time ago. And I've been involved with this organization ever since. And I did a little bit of work. I led a little task force of group of people. There was a part of something that's really important from the very beginning of this organization is to part of the pillar of this is to be inclusive and to try to achieve diversity. And that particular part of the workshop wasn't being received quite as well. And so we did some work to try to make it a little bit more interactive and modeling and change some of that a little bit. And so basically what I'm going to do here is sort of my own take on that. So I'm sort of stealing this. So the reason I'm telling you this is my background. And there were a lot of people that were involved in developing this from all kinds of social science people. So this isn't all my idea, but I'm stealing it all to help you, to share with you guys. So that's my background a little bit. So what I'm also going to try to do here is give you a little bit of, instead of lecturing to you about what we should be doing, and I'm going to try to model a little bit of this, okay? So it's always nice to have learning objectives. And so for this particular presentation, these are the learning objectives. I have actionable verbs here. So when you're done, you should be able to do all of these things, and I'll revisit them again at the end. But basically, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why diversity is kind of important. We'll talk a little bit about what are some of the things that make students feel excluded. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we can do about it, right? Because I think just talking about things that we can do where students feel excluded, and so these social interactions might be kind of awkward, but I want you to leave here feeling that we can do something about it and to have that conversation is okay. All right, so let's start out by talking about this word diversity. Actually, before we go, I hope everybody has, at every site there's a little bag, right? So we have some bags here. And then every person should have there's a little handout there which has some resources on it for you, but also 2 index cards or 2 pieces of paper or whatever. This first piece of paper is private for you. I'm not going to ask you to collect it, but the last one at the very end, I'm going to ask you to reflect about the workshop, and I'd like to collect that from you at the end. So this very first one, I'd like you to look at this picture and think about what most people talk about, when most people talk about making a classroom more diverse, what do you think they're talking about? So write for about a minute. Think what they mean by diverse. Okay, so now I want you to turn to a neighbor, somebody sitting next to you, and share what you have written down. Talk for a couple minutes about that. This is called a think, pair, share. All right. So I'm going to ask for 4 hands to go up and to share some of the things that you talked about in your group. Wait, hold your hands up. I want 4. I want to have 4 hands. I need another hand. Okay, I see 4 now. Okay. So let's start over here. And what's your name?
Andreas.
Andreas, hi.
The first thing I thought about when you looked at it says, what do most people? So I thought, now my view is, what do most people think? And I
Okay.
thought when you ask most people, they'll probably think right away about race. That's
Okay.
probably the first word that comes to mind, diversity. Then as I looked at the picture you had up there, I started thinking about the next thing was gender. You see the different genders. And then I started to see beyond that, to look down a little bit deeper, and I saw ethnicity. Do you want me to go my whole list, or just say something the other?
Yeah, one more. Ethnicity.
Ethnicity, and how that's different than necessarily race, because it could be the same races for different parts of the country, could have different backgrounds. So those are the 3 first that I put down first. As you would say, what most people would come up with if you did a survey of 100 average people on the street.
All right, thanks. And another hand? Okay, back with the on the right. Yes. Melissa. Hi.
I would only add to that definition that when people tend to think of diversity, more is usually better. So we try to have those diverse populations or diverse environments. And usually the thought process is more than enough better.
Okay. Okay, so we had in the very back there was.
Okay, we talk about.
And what's your name?
Ning Fan from Engineering Education.
Hi. Hi, Ning Fan.
Okay. We talk about when solving problems, we can encourage different opinions on different perspectives of the problems and from different people.
Okay. Good.
All different.
Okay. Just different in general. Okay. There was another one there. There seems to be an engineering education group over here, huh?
Yeah, I actually am. My name is Alice. I'm also in engineering education.
Cool.
I also think of the context of culture, contextual differences, also socioeconomic and age differences.
Okay. Okay, but that's 4. Would anybody else like to chime in? Go ahead.
Mirala Meyer from AWS department. I think also that educational background can be very diverse. You can have people that already have a very high standard of education, and you can have some that have their minimum education, which is something you have to account for.
Okay. Yeah. Some people are better prepared with some of those skills that they need, right? Anybody else want to add to this? Gino. What else? Any ideas?
Pretty much covered
Okay.
most of what I have. It was a little bit more specific on religious background.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I started putting these things in 2 different columns. Why do you think I'm putting things in 2 different columns? Do you see any difference between the 2?
One appears to be demographic, to be more soft, worldview, cultural background.
Yeah.
That might affect your opinions about things as opposed to.
Right. Any? Right. Okay, so here and then I'll get Mike. Go ahead. Yeah, say what you said again. I couldn't hear it.
Maybe things that you're born with versus maybe things that influenced you as you were growing up or where you grew up.
Okay, yeah.
I took just a little different track. I think you could also categorize as diversity of different views or perspectives, and then a lot of these things are the source of those different
Okay, yeah.
views and perspectives. So,
Uh-huh.
this is one
And,
bucket,
yeah.
or two classifications for grouping, but you could do other ways too.
And Mike, was that Mike out there? Yeah.
That's another category, diversity of Asians.
Here, here. Actually, that, yeah. And I'm actually going to,
Sight impaired or hearing impaired, that's also a type of
Yep.
diversity.
Abs-
Another one I had was geography, diversity of where you grow up.
Yeah.
You have a lot of those same things, but grow up in different parts.
yeah. Yep. And I meant to start this out by first saying hello to all the distance sites. And I just messed that up right away, right? So who's here of the distance sites? I see Mike and Elisa and Vernal. I know those guys. Who else is here? I can look over here. Hey, Pam. And hey, Moab. Hi, guys. Hi, Blanding. Where are you? And Price. Yay. Okay. So yeah, what I was thinking about when I made these different things is when we talk about diversity, there's a lot of things that we can see, right? And they're visible, and we call these, I'm going to call it visible or explicit. Okay? These are things that I can look and see diversity. There's visible kinds of things. But then there's other things that are sort of invisible. I can't type and write at the same time. And they're implicit. Okay? Let's see if I can. I'm not a multitasker. I can't do two things at once. Okay, there we go. All right, that's a little bit better, right? So there's things that we can see, right? And and that's the things that I think people tend to talk a lot. But when we're thinking about our classroom, there's a lot of stuff that you don't see, and everybody, especially just any kind of experiences, right? Those implicit things about their experiences, like their socioeconomic background or their education that they have, or how people have treated them in the past about whatever it is. Okay, so there's a lot of things that we can keep adding to this for a long time, but there really are, the distinction I want to make here is that there's things you can see, the explicit and the implicit differences. All right, so why is whoa. Oh, thanks. Thanks. All right, so why is diversity important? So I would like to sort of argue that there's a lot of evidence showing that those who are educated in a more diverse environment with more diverse opinions and experiences and things like that tend to be intellectually flexible and creative, make meaningful contributions, can be effective team players, are successful leaders, and just basically do the right thing. They're just tend to be good people, right, and do stuff. There's a lot of studies that, empirical kinds of studies that show that diverse groups can be much more innovative and creative. There's also a lot of evidence that say diverse groups are very difficult to work together. There can be a lot of angst and difficulty with that. So how do we reconcile that? There is also some information that says when those diverse groups come together in a very structured manner with sort of rules and can't think of the example right now, but if there is in a, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a well-managed organization, right, where there's rules and this is how we all get along, then that tends to sort of buffer out that disciplinary or the conflict, and that's when we get a lot more creative and innovative, successful kinds of outcomes from those groups. But just remember, though, that this idea, if that's true, and if we believe in that, then our goal then is to try to increase diversity. And especially, I'm coming from a science background, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, right, where we have a lot of groups that have been traditionally excluded from this group or are not being represented. And so if we can increase the diversity of the kids that we're graduating and getting into these professions, then we hopefully can have a more innovative future ahead of us. Right, so as we move forward, I just want you to think a little bit about what does your classroom look like, right? Does your classroom look like this? No, good, glad to hear that. Okay, so what does your classroom look like, right? How are you structuring that room to make sure that everybody's being included, everybody's doing something, okay, and participating? So here is a question that I'd like you to look at for a second. And I'll call on a few of you to answer. Yeah. All right. Blanding. I see Carla down there, right? Blanding, what's your answer to this question? Technology, okay. Like mobile phones? Huh? Okay. How about price? Yeah, free. Yeah. Okay, moving around. Good. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So this word means a lot of things. So I know what I meant. I'm talking about making a mobile, like. Who was that? Wayne. Yeah, so like Wayne said, to have to make a mobile, right? But if I just went ahead and said, okay, make a mobile, and had a homework assignment without explaining that, people are coming from different angles, right? So we kind of want to make sure that we always, if there's words that are kind of weird, make sure that we have some clarification there. So I'm talking about a mobile, which is a kinetic sculpture, basically, that kind of move. And so we're going to have a little activity here it's going to be a common experience for everybody here at this workshop so that we can have a conversation about some education perspectives as we move forward, right? So I'm going to give you 8 minutes. You're going to work in a group, right? So there's some groups here, and every site has their own little kit there. So you're going to make a mobile, and you have 8 minutes. So keep an eye on this thing. And at the end of 8 minutes, we're going to come back together. I'm going to ask everybody to show me your mobile.
Oh, we got this too.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask everybody. I'm going to start out with the sites, the remote sites first, and I'm going to ask you to just show me your mobile and say one word about it. Okay. Okay, so blanding. Oh, time's up. You can't keep adding. I wanted you to show me your mobile and say one word about it. Okay, blanding. Oh, cute. Okay. Right, and then who we have?
We just have elements from our environment showing up in our mobile, and they're trying to help us relate to the environment we work and live in. Some of them are pretty rare, like the blue water over here on the one side is, something we long for sometimes, maybe the ocean. But, we are an ancient ocean here. We just don't have the water anymore. And then we have red rocks, and we have fractures and faults, and we have stringy organic things and some snow. So, we can relate it to our environment.
That was more than one word, but thank you. I like it. Okay, then I see, who else is here? Pam, did you find it? All Alone in Tooele?
No, I did not.
But you
However,
did your own.
while I was looking for it, I got some paper clips and a couple little packs of Post-its, and I drew stars on them. And so my word is improvised.
That is so Pam. If you know Pam, that is so Pam. Awesome. All right. And Price, you guys didn't have a kit though, huh? Darn it. Aw. Okay, who else is out there? Vernal? Did they leave? Okay. Oh, wait, so I'm sorry. Wait, so who was next? I didn't mean to cut you off. That's Moab. Okay, Moab? One word? Very good confidence. Vernal.
Sibilance. It's from an SNL Tom Hanks sketch. Anyway.
I don't know that word.
What's a
but
real word?
okay.
I was thinking crap. Like we put a bunch of crap on a hanger. It looks great. I'm hanging it on your office door, by the way.
Thank you. I would love that. Thanks. All right, so back here then. Here's a group right here. John and Greg. Snow. We're having snow here. Okay, then this one. Yay! All right, in the back. Can you stand up? I can't see. Can you stand up? There we go, so everybody can see. Oh, I see. I like that, yes. Gotcha. Ah, cool. Cool, so you're using the theme of the workshop there. Yes. Good, cool. Cool. Okay, here.
Unique.
I like that. USU, yay, some spirit there. Back? Charms? Charms. Like Lucky Charms?
I'm not even holding ours.
Okay, and here?
Settling.
Settling.
This is good enough.
Okay. And back here?
We were going for balance.
Oh, nice. Yep, it balances. And then this group?
Strategery.
Strategery.
We spent the first minute talking, are we going to do it individually, collaborative, assembly line, creative? Then we had to balance it with symmetry. We had to come up with hearts and wings and airplanes, but we had a plan to plan.
Okay, so I like this one the best because it's really colorful. Yay, winners! Yay! It's exactly what I was looking for. Yay, perfect. Okay. Okay, so we just did that. All right. Yeah. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to break down what happened here, right? And think about what was going on. Are there any, did anybody have any emotions with this, what just happened? What did you feel like? You didn't get that color. Yeah, and color is what I was looking for. How do you guys feel about that? How about Greg and John here?
Well, we all would rather be skiing, and not that this isn't wonderful, but the snow really, not the bland, the beauty of the white.
Honestly, I kind of like that one a lot.
Yeah, we get snow flames.
Okay, but like, what color did you have?
We have purple, silver lining.
Yeah. Okay.
Silver lining.
All right. So I saw some things as I was walking around. I saw, did everybody have the same stuff in your bags? No. Okay, and some people were having to make do. So let's think about this a little bit, right? So for example, in the back here, there was stuff, and I saw Kim cutting away with scissors, right? But where did you get those scissors?
We
There were tools, we had resources we brought with us.
Okay, but they weren't given to you, right? Pam had nothing, right? That is such a RC student mode right there. That's awesome, Pam. Okay, Pam had nothing, and she kind of tried to figure it out, right? So let's talk about this for a second and talk about awareness. Think about what was happening as you were building your mobiles. I gave you an objective to build a mobile, right? But what I was really doing is I was trying to see how people were going to behave and interact amongst groups. So first of all, I want to know about awareness, right? So I want you to talk for just 2 minutes in your group. How aware were you that the materials that other groups had were not the same as what you had? How aware were you, and how did it feel, right? How did you feel about it, right? And then we're going to talk about what did you do about it, okay? So first, how aware were you of differences amongst the groups? Okay. Okay, so let's have a quick conversation about that. Anybody in the regional campuses would like to make a comment? How about Moab?
Yes, it was very interesting because some of us simply noted that everyone had different materials, and some noticed that the materials were better and were frustrated by that. I think that's about it. Anything else? Yeah.
Okay. All right, how about Blanding?
I think most of us were involved in the process and didn't notice the different materials for the most part.
Okay, all right. Here,
Yeah,
Logan?
We weren't really aware of the differences until, again, some said better, but there was no better or worse of materials until the end, when you graded it with more color. You know, that was the only time when it was different, because all of a sudden.
Well, but that's what I like. Don't you know what I like?
Yeah.
That's what a mobile's supposed to be. Don't you know that?
Are we graded on the product or the process?
I graded you on the product. That's the final thing, right? So you're pissed now, huh? Right? I wouldn't normally do that, right? I'm playing the devil. Yeah, right? So knowing what the rules are would have been nice, right? So you felt a little excluded, maybe, because in the end, yeah, like, yeah. So what do you want to do now? Do you want to like keep working hard for me and my, as a teacher? Yeah. Okay. So I'm over kind of playing this, but you kind of get the idea, right? So having rules. And anybody else want to make a comment about awareness? Kim, were you going to say something? Okay. All right. So let's talk then a second about action. Did your team ask, like, if you were aware? It seems like everybody was pretty involved in what you were doing and weren't aware of what was going on until it was over, right? But if I did this in a place once, and one group had scissors and the other group didn't have scissors, and I had there was string with no scissors, right? And you guys, everybody here was just so creative and didn't matter, just they did their own thing, right? But there was one group where she asked to hey, can we borrow your scissors? And they said no. And she said, why not? And he goes, well, because it's the rules. And she goes, there are no rules. He goes, no, we can't give you. And they were just they had so much stuff, and they were literally like this, you can't have it, And she's like, she asked even, and they said no. Okay, it was pretty funny. So I guess since nobody really noticed, I'll just sort of skip over this. But how might invisible rules in unstructured learning environments influence student learning? So what I want you to think about as we move forward, I'm going to talk about structuring your classroom. Think about how this experience would have been more fair and more inclusive of everybody to feel success, okay, if I had made the rules clear, right? That you can share, you can go get your resources, you can go get paper clips, right? And so I'm getting ahead of myself here. Did your team offer materials to another team if you saw that they didn't have it? Okay, so if you have extra stuff, did you notice hey, would you like to use my stuff? Or no, it's mine, right? How are you going to be about that? Right? So let's go and have a quick conversation now, and if you could switch my thing again, about What do you think might this resource bag represent in a classroom experience about how students are feeling? What might that bag of resources be? Some bags were better or richer, okay, and some bags were a little leaner, okay. And I thought this is an outcome that I've never seen before, is that the lean bags didn't matter because people just got their own stuff, and Pam didn't even have a bag, right? She made her own anyway, right? It's really resourceful. But she knows about how to get those resources, okay? So what might this resource bag represent? I'm just going to have some people raise their hands, shout out. Mm-hmm.
Background knowledge on topics.
Okay. Right, so Pam had nothing, right? But she kind of knows about, okay, I've got to figure something out here, and I'm supposed to have a mobile, so I'm going to, yeah, right? So she kind of grabbed. What else? Pardon me?
Previous experience.
Okay. And how so?
You know, my son went to start playing football in high school. Everybody else started when they were like 12 months old. And so he's a freshman in high school. He's like 6'2" and 200+ pounds. He's never played a game of football in his life. And so there was a lot of difficulties that first little while because people made a lot of assumptions just because he was a big dude that he played football all the time.
Ah, excellent. Yeah, right? Just because he looked like he should be able to play. And then when he can't, then people are going, why can't you? Okay. Yeah, like our students. You're supposed to know this. Why don't you know this? I know it.
High school?
Yeah. Okay, in the very back?
Support structures. Many of them have mentors or family members who have had a degree. I would imagine a first-generation student will not have the same resources as someone that is not.
They don't even know where to go, like, where do I register? Or what? There's a library? Uh-huh.
I would say not equitable.
And elaborate on that.
Well, I think that the resources were such that I didn't necessarily have some of the resources that I needed to accomplish the same objective. So I think in terms of what I had in that bag, it wasn't equitable with what other people had. So I felt like I didn't have the same opportunities necessarily to get the same objective or to reach your objective. I didn't feel like it was equitable in terms of resources.
Okay. And then here, yes?
Physical resources like textbooks or a computer. Some students have the textbooks, others don't. Some have a computer at home, others don't.
Yeah, so it's a money thing sometimes even too. Yeah, okay. I'll put a $sign there. Uh-huh. Is that spelled right? I don't have the spelling resources. Uh-huh.
I keep thinking personality, some people just bubble a little bit more if you're teaching a writing class or something versus,
A mobile class.
a mobile class. There's different types of personal characteristics are going to stand out and benefit people, whereas other people might not have those.
What else could this symbolize? Yeah. Yeah, so different personalities are just going to jump right in there, and others are maybe shy or if you have if you expect students to talk a lot and they're introverted, right? You need to give them a chance to think before they talk. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I have very differently motivated students, and we used to have on our evaluations, it used to say what grades do you expect coming into this class, and it always surprised me that not everybody wanted an A. A lot of students come in wanting a C, and so they're not going to get into it no matter what you do. But as long as they're going to get to a C, they're fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, you go ahead. Huh? Yeah. And, Neil?
It wasn't exactly in the bag, but one thing I noticed as I was wandering around was just the group structures. So we had one where we had 2 people, we had one where we had 3 people, we had a group back
A
here. with a whole
huge
bunch of
one.
Huge groups
Mhm.
of engineers, and we had
Mhm.
the College of Agriculture over here, and then we had, I mean, just the
Yeah,
the
so I,
differences in the people around and their.
uh-huh. And I noticed the big group in the back didn't get started for a long time because they talked about it first. They were planning it all out first, right? The engineers.
And so there were different levels of organization, and
Mhm.
some just kind of went in, so that the group dynamics and the people around them were in a lot of ways.
Okay. So we could go on this for quite a while, but I hope you kind of get the idea that when you're thinking about the diversity in the room, there's a lot of diversity, these kinds of things that we already saw, right? And that are these kind of things that we talked about, but are these explicit or implicit in how they affected what's going on in the classroom? Yeah, there's a little bit of both, right? Some of the, the structure, maybe some of the resources that people have. But there's so many things. Each person is really an individual, and the kinds of experiences that they've had, and the background, and the skills, and the knowledge that they have, it's all different. And something I'd like to add on to here, what I kind of look at this, and it's because of the angle that I come from, but is that this is, how do you spell privilege? Okay, so I think about this sometimes, and this fits things like, background experiences. If somebody is a first-time, first-generation student, right? They don't have the same knowledge. Or if somebody has a lot of physical resources, they have some privilege, right? And typically, like that group, I think about that group where they had all of this stuff. In fact, they had so much stuff they didn't even know what to do with it to make their mobile. And when somebody asked to use the scissors, they said no, right? I'm working really hard on my thing, right? And not noticing that the other people didn't even have anything or help them, right? So anyway, so I hope that I'll go back to the slides now. I hope that this is kind of going to make a framework as we talk with things. So you've sort of experienced maybe remembering what it's like to be a student, what some of these things, be thinking about that diversity in your classroom and how we bring everybody into it. How do we structure our classroom to make sure that everybody's participating, everybody has a fair chance at things. So I also want to give some acknowledgement. So this is a woman named Kimberly Tanner. She's like one of my teaching heroes. She runs something called CEPL, the Science Education Partnership and Assessment Laboratory at the University of San Francisco, I think. Anyway, and this is adapted from some publications that I was talking to her, I'm like, how do we make this better? And she said, oh, have you done the mobile thing? So I wanted to acknowledge her, right? So I'm going to have some sort of summarizing with each section a little big idea here. And the big idea here is that we need to look at students and treat them as individuals because they're all have different baggage or skills or sets or whatever. So think about those things as you look at your students. Some other reasons that we haven't talked about is why a student might feel excluded, okay? And I stole this, a resource that's a really good place to start at is, I wrote it down here. It's at the Carnegie Mellon University, has some teaching resources on there, and I have on your resources, I have a link to that and on the webpage. But it says, the first question is, can learning take place if, in fact, it silences the voices of people it's supposed to teach? And the answer is yes. People learn that they don't count. So if you feel like, oh, well, I'm not even getting, screw it, I'm not going to do it anymore, right? So two of those things that influence it are things called implicit bias and stereotype threat. So if anybody was able to do those activities that I suggested before you come, was anybody able to do the implicit bias tests online? Or to look at watch Claude Steele's little video talking about stereotype threat? Okay, so these are real things that affect students. We all have biases that are implicit because of our experiences, right? And implicit bias is just this pervasive underneath idea, right? You look at somebody and you make some judgment, right? And I do this, and I'm so happy when I'm wrong sometimes if I have a bad judgment, right? And we can't really get rid of that, right? We have this unintended, unconscious influence when we look around our world, and there's an evolutionary reason for that. You know, danger you run from, whatever, right? But if we are aware of these kind of biases, then maybe we can start mitigating them a little bit. And these biases can impact how learning. I remember when I was in grad school and I was taking physical chemistry, and the guy who taught that was the biggest jerk you've ever met in your life. And he put up a problem on the board, and he just threw it up, and he was picking on me because I was the girl, maybe, I don't know. And he said, okay, what do you think the answer to this is going to be? You know, and so I estimated. I'm like going, I look at it and like 20 kilocalories, and he said, you're wrong, you're just guessing. And he goes and he does this thing for 10 minutes, and it was 19.8 kilocalories. I'm like, oh, and I just sat there like this. I'm like, I am not even going to listen to you anymore. I am so mad, right? That exclusion, that just, he made this judgment that I'm stupid, and because I'm a girl, I don't know why he did that, but it just, ruined physical chemistry for me. It's probably, that's a good excuse because I probably wouldn't have done so good anyway. But anyway, so those kinds of biases, we need to sort of think about those. And I'm not going to go and talk about this for too long. But the other thing that is really impactful with students is this concept of stereotype threat. So you know what a stereotype is, you know, certain people don't drive well, old people, whatever. This guy, Claude Steele, he's actually the provost now at UC Berkeley. He did a lot of studies on this and wrote this really cool book. I recommend reading it if you're interested. It's called Whistling Vivaldi and Other Cute Clues to how stereotype affects us. The book is called Whistling Vivaldi because he had an African-American friend who was at grad school someplace, and he had a hoodie on walking down the street, right? And he noticed that when he moved into the city, when he'd be walking down the sidewalk, people would like take their kids and go to the other side of the street. Oh, there's this guy in a hoodie. And he realized that they're afraid of me. And so what do I do? And his way to sort of deal with that is he started whistling Vivaldi. And they go, oh, right? So some bad guy wouldn't know Vivaldi to whistle, right? Oh, he must be okay. So he kind of found some way that people make these judgments. And it makes you, if you are in a situation where you want to perform well and it's important to you, and you feel that other people might be judging you, whether they are or not. Okay, so like I love this picture right here. Whether they are or not, you still may feel that pressure, and it takes some of your activity out of your brain worrying about this, that you don't perform as well. And so they've done a lot of, Claude Steele did a lot of these studies with like physics students. If at the beginning of an exam, right, with controlled experiments, if you say, ask people to identify your race versus the control group, perfectly capable people, if their race is African Americans can't do physics, right? Boom, right? But compared to the group that didn't get asked that, right? So the point here is that don't do damage, right? Don't go, hey, all right, I'm glad to see there's a girl here in engineering, right? Treat them more like, hey, you know, one of the mitigations that they do in these things is these self-affirmations. So if you have people at the beginning of the semester or maybe before an exam say, what's something that you did this weekend that made you feel really good about yourself? And you write about that, and then you take the test. That eliminates that stereotype threat, and they can perform again, right? Gets that worry out of their head and allows everybody to be back up on the same playing field. Okay? And so I think it's really fascinating work. This is actually from a really cool NPR story about women in science, right? It's a NPR. You can, if you're interested, I have a link to that. You can check it out. All right. So another thing that I would like to talk about here is in the lexicon. So a lot of you, like somebody here is from sociology, right? This was a really new word for me, right? And to add to my lexicon of thinking about these things is this concept of equity versus equality. So what's going on here? Is this an equitable situation or a situation of equality? What's the difference? Vinny, what's the difference? What's going on here? Equality or equity? How? Yeah, exactly, right? So what's the difference between equal and equitable. Okay, and which do you prefer? Which is more fair? Okay, so I stole this off the internet. Okay, equality is giving everybody the same thing, and equity is giving everybody what they need to succeed. Okay, right? And so I did this equality thing for a long time. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't give you a break on the deadline because then I'd have to give everybody the break on the deadline, right? What difference does it matter if it's an extra day because this person's kid was sick all night or whatever, right? What's another day, right? He needs an extra day. Yeah, sure, you got it, right? Makes my life a little bit more complicated, but that's okay, right? And so the idea is if we can, now this is equitable because everybody can see. Okay, here this is equal, everybody got the same box, but maybe we can do things. And it's actually not giving some students different stuff, but what we're really doing here is if we have a structured environment, right, so that everybody, basically a lot of the things we do in our classroom to help people who are a little disadvantaged, like maybe being more flexible with putting things in, providing more resources, being very clear about your assignments, blah, 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 blah. That's going to help the students who don't know the culture. They're coming in first-generation students, blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't hurt the ones who already know the system, right? It just brings everybody up to the same place. What we want is a level playing field. And so I hope that this idea of equity, when I thought about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, sure, you got another day for the quiz, no problem, right? Because it's not hurting anybody else, right? So again, this is coming from my friend Kimberly Tanner. She's always saying this. She says, question assumptions about origins of student behavior. She says, oh, we need to move away. And I did this when I first started teaching. I'm like, what is wrong with these students? I'm lecturing, I'm telling them everything they need to know. Why don't some of them get it, right? And now I've turned it around a little bit like, oh, a bunch of people didn't get this on the exam. What did I do? How can I make this better and make sure that they all get it? Right? And that's going kind of from student-centered to teacher-centered. What am I doing? And so she has actually some verbiage about it. It's this student deficit model, right? What's wrong with the students? And that's not good, okay? And I would like to argue that we need to have more of a learning environment deficit. If something's not working, how can I change the learning environment to support people that are struggling, okay? And so she says move away from that and move toward the idea that learning environments are lacking in structure, okay? And so this is something she's always saying, learn to see in equity. She says, like, I want you to all go back now and keep thinking about learning to see inequity so that you can do something about it. So the next time you have a department meeting, look around and see who's not talking, right? Look at the students and see who's not raising their hands, okay? And look and see if you can do something to bring them in. Okay, how are we doing with time? Okay, yeah, we gotta go. All right, so so I hope this wasn't a big downer, right? Well, I want you to feel like you have something to do. Okay, so let's talk about some things that we can do about this. So we can do something called inclusive teaching, right? And in fact, with our summer institutes, we used to call it the diversity session. And diversity is really the goal, but what are we doing? Let's be inclusive is sort of more of an action kind of way to talk about it. So inclusive teaching is what we're trying to do. And the idea here is to teach all of your students. And so we want to be thinking about seeing students as individuals to reduce stereotype threat. Don't elicit it because that can actually do a little bit of damage. You might want to read up on that. And then use a lot of active learning and scientific teaching, evidence-based stuff. With a lot of these workshops, you guys are doing awesome stuff, right? So using all these things is actually being inclusive because it's helping everybody get to the point that they need to do to learn and give practice and stuff like that, okay? So what I'd like you to do, gave you a handout, and this is just baby steps. This is not an inclusive list of activities, but I hope that you can go through this. What I want you to do is talk to your neighbors, look at this list at the front, and go through it and say, and afterwards we'll have a little debrief again. Do you know what these things are? This is, again, Kimberly Tanner wrote this. She's like my little hero on this. Okay, look at that list and see if there's things that you would like to try that you want to know more about, and it's just a place to start. And if you want to really delve in deeper, I attached some things that you can take home and some other resources that you can look at. So go ahead and let's spend a few minutes looking at that. Or does anybody have questions about things that were on the list? A lot of people asked about what's a whip around, and I didn't know what that was either. I'd never heard of that. But that's where, like, for example, I could have done it if I had a little bit more time. I was worried about the clock. When I asked about diversity, right, I could have everybody say a word about diversity, and I would go, every single person would say something. You can whip around the room, and everybody says something, and then everybody's participating, and right? And it doesn't really matter what they say. It's not intrusive or embarrassing or anything to say those things, and that it gets everybody kind of feeling included as part of the thing. Can you see how a lot of these things would be inclusive, how they would work to bring everybody in, right? And these are just little baby steps that you can start that are kind of tangible that you can, if you feel, right? But if this is something you already do, then go flip into the later pages and start looking at other stuff.
Do you have any examples of being explicit about promoting access and equity for all students? What?
Number 15.
Number 15.
Yeah, I have to look at my paper. I didn't bring it. Explicit about access. Oh,
Being explicit about promoting access and equity for all students. So how do you
say that this is really important to me, right? And so, for example, scientists, we work in groups, right? And scientists talk about stuff. And so we are in this biology class, and we're learning biology. And so we want to start learning to be like biologists. And I expect you to talk about this and be able to describe what you're thinking, right? And I want everybody to be included. It's important to me. I want all of you, it's that kind of a thing. And tell them, I'm trying to be inclusive with you guys. I want everybody here to participate. And I don't want to leave anybody behind. Be explicit about that. Any questions out in Price? Wayne, you guys, do you have any questions? Okay. Did you? Wayne?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think a lot of them are good. I had one that I didn't see on here. I made up the other day. I'm calling it the piggyback method.
Okay.
And maybe it's out there and I haven't read about it, but you have one person, anybody, answer the question, and then you call on a couple other people specifically and ask if they agree or disagree and why.
I like that.
So then
Yeah.
they're not really put on the spot because they can say, yeah, I agree, and if they don't have a reason, that's okay. You can just go on to the next person.
Yeah, so you're bringing everybody in the conversation. I do want to make one point, and I was talking to these guys back here, is like, for example, if you have somebody in your class who's an introvert and they don't like to talk, I mean, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll try to like avoid, making them uncomfortable. But what you can do is, if you really want to demand everybody participating, is you can make sure that they've had a chance to think about it first. And that's why I really like clicker questions, the student response systems, is because they look at it and they think about it and they commit to a question, and then maybe they talk to their friends, and you can maybe even say, all right, what did your group decide, right? And so then some people, and even if they aren't the ones that talking from their group, they talked within the group, or if you give them a chance to think about it. But I do think it could be kind of damaging, like that professor that yelled at me, like, what's the answer? Just to, I think he was trying to embarrass me. Maybe he wasn't, but I don't know. That's the way I felt, right? So he didn't give me a chance to think about it, right? And put me on the spot, and that really shut me down. So if you give them a chance to think about what their answer might be, then that's helpful. Okay. Any other thoughts about this? So after I kind of scared you about all this, do you feel a little bit more like you have some things to do, that it's doable, right? Don't ask about race or gender before an exam. Other than that, all these other things will be good. Okay?
Hey, Leanna, I have. Sorry, this is Mike out here. I've talked to you about some stuff that's cool, but I don't want to take up your time. But I want you to know that there's stuff that's cool that we do. I guess.
Okay. Well, can you say one thing real quick, if there's something that you can share with the group?
Well, yeah, so I flip almost all of my classes now, and it frees up all of my in-class time. And one of the strengths of that is I get to interact with every single student, every single class. And in order to facilitate interaction that's positive, I used to ask a student a specific question about content every class, and I discovered after doing some anonymous surveys my students felt humiliated and put on the spot often when I did that. So what I do now is I ask a question, but my questions are usually non-threatening questions. Like I will ask a student a question like, hey, can you tell me something about your hobby? Or what's one of your hobbies? And then I try and integrate that into my teaching if I can, even if it's in a hilarious, abstract, ridiculous way that will, to make the student feel included. But I could never do that if I didn't flip. But flipping frees up all of in-class time so I can do that. And I interact with every single student, every single class, every day. And I never ask content questions specifically to one student unless I absolutely know that student's okay with it. Usually I'll ask to groups or sites.
Thanks, Mike. Mike is amazing. You guys have to have him come up here and talk about his flipping. He does amazing stuff. He teaches chemistry, and what he's talking about, though, even just asking questions about like what's your hobby or something like that, right? That's an affirmation kind of thing that's making people feel included, and that's the kind of thing that all the students love Mike, right? Because they all know him, right? And they feel like they have this personal connection. That's what Chambliss was talking about last week, right? Yeah, thanks, Mike, about this. I want to flip my classes. I just haven't gotten around to it. So I can just play with them all class time. It'd be really fun. Right? Sorry.
Some questions on number 18.
Okay.
Use praise with caution.
Oh, okay. Yeah, using praise with caution. You don't want to go, oh, that was an awesome answer, right? Because everybody else is like, well, I'm never going to be able to do that, right? Or you're kind of over, right? You just want to say, that was really good. Yeah, we're making progress. Kind of keep things even keel. If imagine it's like little.
Okay to praise, but
yes, but you just don't want to overdo it because then everybody else is going, ugh, they're
they mentioned a flipped classroom, and I don't flip it as you may think of, but I like to flip it in that I expected the students to ask the questions, not me asking them.
So if you
I flipped it that way, and they also know my approach. I told them
yay, yeah.
when I did a test, I would ask a question and they said, what's the answer? I said, I don't need an answer to ask the question. And so I flipped things that way and put the onus on them, and I would do my best to answer or provide it.
Yeah, then you're being whatever, you're acting like people in that discipline and yeah.
But I did expect them to ask questions.
Yeah. And at first they won't do it, right? But then like, oh gosh, he's gonna ask, I better get my stuff together so I can answer the question. Yep, good, cool. All right. Okay, so just a little to add on to this, right? Some of the diversity we talked, somebody mentioned vision, right? Mike couldn't see without the glasses on. But I don't know if you've noticed, but wasn't my font kind of weird looking? Were you like, what the heck is that weird font? Well, there's this universal design. I love this definition. It's also called inclusive design sometimes in terms of designing a building or anything really. And I like this definition. It's a broad spectrum ideas meant to produce buildings, products, and environments that are inherently accessible to older people, people without disabilities, and people with disabilities. I love that. Okay. So two things that I did in here is one is I've used this color scheme that was developed by some people. They actually do immunofluorescence, and they found that they would do red and green because those are two really great colors, but colorblind people can't see the red and the green to distinguish the two colors. So they came up with colors. They did some studies. So these are 3 different types of color blindness. This is what non-colorblind people see. And if you use these colors, all of them can be distinguished by the 3 different types of color blindness. Right? So, and you can download it here if you're interested. And I made my own colors with the RGB in PowerPoint, and there you go. So even colorblind people could see all my colors. And this font is supposed to be really good for dyslexic people. And again, you can download the font here. So the bottom line here, the big picture here, is that we need to structure learning environments to promote fairness and equity and access for all students. If we can. That's sort of the goal. And that's a really nice mental framework, I think, for adding all, why are we doing all these things? It's because we want to have more diversity. We want to bring everybody into the fold and help them all get an education. Because it's really more challenging for some of those little kids that can't see over the fence. We have to let it so everybody can see, okay? And so just sort of to review real quick, I talked about diversity, and so a member of the learning outcomes, you should be able to reflect on a personal definition of what diversity is. We have, right? defend the benefits of diversity in science, well, or in anything. We talked about exclusion. I want you to be able to acknowledge the fact that there are some things that will exclude people based on behaviors and attitudes, but recognize that implicit bias and stereotype threats are solvable problems, and there's ways that we can try to mitigate them, especially if you're aware that they exist in the first place. And then this idea of inclusion we talked about at the end, be able to defend the concept that a structured room, so think back at the mobile experience, right? If I had given you exactly what we're looking for, if I gave everybody the same materials, if I gave out the rules, how that went, everybody would have gotten an A on your thing. Everybody's would have been colorful. Everybody would have been what was looked for, and everybody would have felt successful, right? Instead of being sort of shut down if you didn't have color in your although snow's good too. All right. And then this is just a summary of the big ideas. Treat students as individuals, question assumptions about origins of student behaviors. Why are they being like this? Why are they not doing well on the exam? Why are they coming late to class? You know? Learn to see inequity, who's not talking, right? Think about who's not participating. And then structure your learning environments. And then go out and spread the word. Talk to your colleagues about how we can make things a little bit more inclusive. So I was hoping to be done a little bit earlier, but I would like for you to, in the closing reflection, thinking about stuff, you have the cards. I'm asking you to focus a little bit, and this is the card that I'm going to collect, Mike. This is the second one, right? And all of you at the remote sites, if you would do this and give it to your facilitators so that they can, oh, everybody left. Oh, well. So they can, so I can get that. So I have some feedback and sort of an evaluation of how the workshop went. I'm going to give you a minute to answer, or a couple minutes, to answer these questions. And in a minute, I will stop and see if there's any additional questions, and you can keep writing if you like. But if you could just leave your cards over by the door when you leave. What are one or two elements of your concepts of diversity, the benefits or the challenges of diversity that you hadn't thought of before? Is there anything new that you kind of considered in this workshop? What have you learned in this session that's useful? Something like, I want to go try this in my classroom, or I'm going to think about my class a little bit differently, right? Have I changed your thinking at all? And then, do you have still some questions? Maybe I can get back to you. If you want to put your name on it, I can get back to you, or you can make them anonymous, whatever. But you know where to find me, right? You can look my email up and ask me questions too, but write questions on there. So I'll give you a few minutes, and then I'll stop and see if there's any questions before you go.